of new user office hours, a GEHRIMED training. This is a new initiative for us to help assist our customers provide new user training as users on board or just need to brush up on some skills. And certainly if you would like to use this as a train the trainer type scenario for your organization, you are welcome to do so. I am going to record this so that we can make it available to others down the road, and we'll let you know how you can access it. And our intention is to run these programs monthly on the third Wednesday at this same time. And for at least the first couple, we will record them. I believe that over time they will become fairly redundant since it is going to be a pretty similar agenda every time. However, we'll keep the first couple, 2 or 3 of them archived so that if you or others that you know need access, you'll be able to. I am joined today by Matthew Grappi. He is a colleague of mine here at GPM on the marketing team, and he's going to help facilitate the Q&A section of this. So really, I encourage you to use the Q&A feature in the Zoom meeting bar where you can pop some questions in here. At any point, just pop your questions in. Matthew will keep an eye on that for us so that if it is a question about a topic that we are currently covering, he'll interrupt me and ask the question before I move on to something else. If it's a question that is about functionality that we haven't touched on yet, we'll hang on to that. It might be something that I answer as I go, and then definitely at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So the chat function is really the best place right here for you to type your questions to us. The agenda for today is essentially a new user training. So we'll start by looking at GEHRIMED, what you see when you first log in, what your census management looks like, essentially what you're seeing on the home screen, what those buttons do, and then we'll drill down into patient population, look at how patient population is organized, how you can schedule visits for your patients, how you can manage the details of the patient record, and then the encounter workflow, creating encounters, populating text into your encounters, signing encounters, making changes through addendums or changing the criteria of a signed encounter. And then we can also look at functionality of the triage feature, as well as advanced search to help you look for data that is contained in GEHRIMED that you want to have displayed in Excel spreadsheets. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to hop out of my PowerPoint here and into GEHRIMED. So here's what you see when you first log into GEHRIMED. And if you are actually a brand new GEHRIMED user and you have not seen any patients yet, you will probably not have any of these bars. So what you're seeing here is a visualization of your patient population. Because we have this concept of associating patients to the facilities in which they reside, you are able to section off your patient population, large database of patients in all of the buildings where you go, but rather you can look at your patients according to the facility where they are currently in residence. And when you look at these bars, you'll notice shades of blue and red. The blue simply represents patients that I have seen. The red represents patients that have been seen by others in my organization. So if I'm brand new, I'm going to have all red bars. And you can use this drop down here to see all of the facilities that your team goes to. So if you are brand new, when you look at this screen for your name, you may not have any bars yet because the bars will appear as you sign encounters for patients in those buildings. As a brand new clinician and you don't have any signed encounters yet, you will not have bars. But if you want to take a look at the patient population in a specific facility, you can change this drop down to all providers. And now you can see all of the facilities where my organization sees patients. And I should mention that what we're looking at here is a demo environment. So these are made up facilities with made up patients. It's all pretend data. So we're not exposing anybody's PII or PHI as I go here, but it is going to look and feel very much like your GEHRIMED environment, with the exception of maybe some intricacies in the templates, because you can customize templates to meet your own needs. Otherwise, what you see here is going to look and feel the same as what you see when you're logged in. So if I pop back to just my own facilities, we'll look at immediately beneath the facilities. This is what we call the unsigned encounters ribbon. And this is where encounters sit when I have started the encounter but have not completed it yet. So it will sit here until I sign it as a reminder to me that it's not complete and it needs to be signed in order to get the copy to the facility and to get the information into the billing report that generates for the organization. If I want to go to the encounter, I simply click on it and it will open the encounter for me. And if I want to go look at the details for the patient, you'll see the patient name underlines when I hover there, so I can go straight to the patient from here too. We'll come back and look at what these icons along the bottom mean, but let's jump into one of the facility census so we can take a look at how patients are organized. So if I go to my Westwood Rest Home, actually there was a different one that I had ready for today. Let's see, Eastbrook. If I go to Eastbrook, it's going to show me my patients and all of the patients in this building. And if I click along here, there's going to be different information that shows on each of these tabs. So basically, I can look at this just for myself, or I can look at it for all providers, or I can switch. If I'm an administrative user in my organization, I can switch to a different provider. So what I see here on this scheduled tab is basically visits that have been scheduled for me, because my name is the one picked from the list here. Visits that I've scheduled either today or in the past that have not yet been fulfilled. And if it's a past due visit, it's going to appear in red right here. And then moving left to right, we've got a provider census, which shows the patients that I have seen in this building, the facility census, which shows all of the patients in this facility, the discharge tab, which shows anyone who's been discharged in this building for the past 30 days. After 30 days, the patient leaves this tab, but still remains in the GEHRIMED database. So if someone is discharged and comes back to you in 35 days, you could search for that person by name and then readmit and continue working. But because we know that most readmissions happen within a 30-day window, we keep the patient staged on this tab for 30 days. So it's quick and easy for you to readmit. And I'll show you that shortly. And then finally, facility feed is the tab where if you have a point-click care integration connecting you to the point-click care system in this particular building, this tab will populate with patients that are in the point-click care system so that you can import them into GEHRIMED. All right, I have the patient staged here. One second. Okay, so you can see on this schedule tab, I've got a visit for today. Visits for today appear in yellow, and visits in the past, like we said, appear in red. If I want to expand this out, I can change this date. So if I want to know what my schedule is in this building for all of next week, I could change this to hit enter, and then it's going to bring in any future visits that I have scheduled for next week, and the future visits appear in green. So you are able to select a date in the future so that you can see results from today until whatever that date is that you've chosen, including anything that's in the past, like this one that was October but never completed. Now, moving left to right, what all of these icons mean and what we see here is two different things in this very first column. This button means that there is an open encounter already for this patient. So if I click edit, that will open the existing open encounter so that I can make edits. If there's a green plus sign, we know that there is no encounter open for this patient, and clicking this green plus sign creates a new encounter. Next, we see the location. This is used differently from organization to organization. Oftentimes it's a room and a floor. It might be other information that your team needs you to know about the patient. So that's really a practice decision how this field gets populated. This little eyeball shows you a very quick look at patient details. So if I click on it, it will show me patient name, insurance, who last saw the patient, when the next scheduled visit is, along with the date of birth and the location, and the age. If I just want that to go away, I click the eyeball again. It's almost like when you're online shopping and you want to see a quick view of something instead of going into a new page, it just pops a little box with details for you. If I click on the name, I go right into what we call the patient chart or the patient details screen. And this is where we have this comprehensive look at all of our patients, along with the same demographics that we just saw when we did the quick view, a list of encounters. So these are all encounters that have ever been signed for this patient by me or anybody else on my team. So if you need to look back historically at an old encounter, you can always use these arrows to navigate to the older encounters and look at them. If you see one with a bubble like this that looks like a dialogue bubble, that means that there is an addendum added to that encounter. We've got some buttons here that help you control some things. So this creates a new encounter. There are multiple ways to get to different places and to take different actions in GEHRIMED. We try to give you the quickest path to things as possible. So when we were on that census screen before, I showed you how to create a new encounter. If you're on this patient details screen and you want to create a new encounter, you can do so by clicking this. You don't have to bounce back to the facility census in order to create a new encounter. You can discharge from this page. You can look at information. This is going to open up some Medline Plus health information. So if you ever want to print information about a diagnosis for a patient, you can do that straight from here. And then you note if patient education was provided. And then over on the right here, we've got a running problem list for the patient. Every diagnosis code that has ever been used on an encounter is included here, along with the date that it was last used. So when I hover over these, I can see when these were added to encounters. I can manage these. So if it was here by accident and we don't want it here anymore, I can click on it and I can see the history of when that was used. I can look for information about the diagnosis. And I can click manage, and that lets me remove any of these. So if you add a diagnosis and then realize that it was the wrong one or it was there in error, you can open manage, click on it, and then if I need to either make it inactive, resolved, or delete, I can do so right from this screen. I can also add more diagnoses. So you'll see here that I get this same type of head box. If you're familiar with GEHRIMED, you know that so if I say, okay, I need to add a new diagnosis to this patient before she's seen the next time, and let's say that she has some lower back pain, this type of head box helps me find ICD-10 codes. I don't have to know what the code is. I just know how to describe the diagnosis. And so I can click on it. And if there is a star, like this star that we see before the code, that means that this is an unspecified description for the code. And when I click on this, I am prompted to narrow my description. So I can decide if it's acute or chronic. And as I click, you'll see that over here on the right, my options are narrowing. until I have only one. And so based on the choices that I made here, this is the correct diagnosis. So I can manage the problem list straight from here. I don't have to manage the problem list inside an encounter. And then what we see down here are some left to right tabs, and each of these are going to show information that is specific to the patient and is considered part of the patient's medical record. So if you're using triage, and we'll show triage later, if there are any triage notes related to this patient, they will show up here. If there are any active notes, like some people use active notes to add an alert type note to the patient. So if there's something that everybody who sees this patient needs to know immediately about him or her, you can add it as a pop-up note so that anytime someone touches the medical record, they see that alert right away. I've heard that it can be used in the case of a patient who has been placed on hospice care, but the family doesn't want the patient to know that she's on hospice care. I can add an active note to pop up and tell everyone who opens her chart that she is a hospice patient, but her family doesn't want her to know that. If you've ever answered quality measures for a patient, those will be listed here. So here's another way to look at the history of quality measures for this patient for every year that you've had this patient under your care. And then you can look at and manage scheduled visits from here also. And in a few minutes, we'll look at how to schedule visits and how to manage visits. But just know that you can see the visit that is coming the soonest on the patient census. So when I'm looking at that census, I can see what visit is next. And if there's an old visit that wasn't fulfilled, that's what will appear. If we're up to date, it's going to be whatever visit is coming next. So for example, if this patient has a 1-month visit scheduled for tomorrow, but a psychiatric visit scheduled for next week, it's only the 1-month visit for tomorrow that will show up on the census, but all of her upcoming visits would show up on this tab. If you're entering vitals into the GEHRIMED encounters, they will appear here, so you can look at a history of patient vitals on this tab. If you are manually entering lab work or imaging or immunizations, you'll see that here. If you're doing any assessments, you'll see those here. Same is true for procedures. And the attachments is a way that you can attach things to the patient record. So if you want to attach a copy of the face sheet that you get from the facility, or if there's some other sort of documentation, maybe an insurance card or anything on paper that you want to attach, you can click this button. If it is a file on your computer, you just click choose file. And if it's a scanned image, you select it and it gets uploaded here as an attachment. If you are an iPad user and you click new attachment, it will immediately open your camera on your iPad. Just take a picture of what you want and it will upload here. This allows you to take a picture and add it without it actually capturing the image on your local device. It only captures the image in GEHRIMED. So that's a great security feature. Okay, I'm going to click out of here back to the census, which was where we came here from. And I'm just going to pause to see if there are any questions in the Q&A. Tammy, we will get to that question, I promise, when we're doing encounter workflow. Okay, so we are back to the census screen and what we see on the census screen. And what comes next is this button, which allows you to discharge. So if you are going to discharge the patient, you simply click this button. And I'm not going to discharge her because she's the one I'm working with today. But if I click this and I need to discharge the patient, it's going to ask me for the date. So if I actually discharged somebody yesterday, I can backdate this. If I know the discharge is happening tomorrow, I can set this for tomorrow's date. I'll pick a reason. I'll pick myself from the list. If the patient's going to another facility that is in your GEHRIMED database, you can just type ahead and find it here. If there are any notes that you need to add, this is a free text field. And if you need to also create an encounter at the time, you can do so right here, and you would pick the billing provider and pick your template. If you're just doing a straight discharge with no encounter, you would click this button. If you need the encounter, you would click this button. I'm just going to do a straight discharge. This is asking me if I want to send an electronic summary of care document. So if I'm discharging a patient to the hospital and I know their direct trust email address and I want to send them a CCDA from GEHRIMED, I can do that right here. Otherwise, I can say do not create summary of care and I skip it. And now you'll see that patient is gone from this screen because he is no longer an active patient in my GEHRIMED database. Next, my last visit, how many days ago it was. It counts the days for you. And last seen by provider. So if this was somebody else, if my last visit was 42 days ago, but somebody else's visit was 12 days ago, that person's name would be here. So it would help me understand if somebody saw the patient between the last time I saw him and now. And then finally, scheduling visits. So we'll first go look at how to readmit this patient, and then we'll come look at scheduling managed visits. And I'll also mention, I'm going to go to this screen where there's a lot more data, that all of these fields are sortable alphabetically. So if I click on these up and down arrows, it changes the order of what I'm seeing. By default, it's going to show you your patients in alphabetical order. But if I want to sort by my last visit and see who's never had a visit from me or which patient I saw longest ago, I can click here to sort that way. I can also do the same for last seen by any provider. And then finally, if I want to sort by scheduled visits, I can. So I can bring all of my old visits to the top, or I can bring all of my recent and current visits to the top. All right, let's look at the discharge tab. So here's this patient that we just discharged. I can now readmit him. This button that was a discharge button on the previous screen, when we're on this tab, becomes a readmit button. So it's so easy to just readmit by clicking here. It will by default want to readmit him to the facility where he most recently was, but if he's going somewhere else, let's say he's going to go to a skilled facility, I can move him to a different facility and then readmit him into that building. Okay, scheduled visits. So we manage scheduled visits in a couple different places. There was that scheduled visits tab on the patient details. You can also schedule and manage all patient visits from right here. So if I want to look at just today's visit or the visit that I see currently, I click on the underlined visit. And this would let me change it. So if I wanted to change this to tomorrow, for example, I could just change this date, set it to tomorrow, and save and close. But if I want to look at this patient's history of current visits, I open that calendar icon. And now it's going to show me in a list any visits that she has. Right now, she just has this one. If I need to add more visits for her, I would click this green plus sign and we see schedule a visit appears. And here is my window that allows me to schedule a visit. So I can pick my visit type. I'm going to say, let's schedule a 1 month visit. And fairly new now, you can create recurring visits. So if I need for this patient to be seen once a month for the next 6 months, I can click recurring. I can say this visit recurs every 30 days. And I want to end it after 6 occurrences. I want the first visit date, and by default, it's bouncing out 30 days because it knows it's a 30-day visit. And that's why this 30 is in parentheses. So as a GEHRIMED administrator, under your visit types, you have the ability to associate frequency with a specific visit type so that when your team is scheduling recurring visits, GEHRIMED knows how many days apart these specific visit types should be. So I want this to end after 6 occurrences. The next visit date is 1 month from today. It's going to show me what day of the week that is. I'm going to assign them to myself. You can assign to any provider. If you assign it to any provider, then this visit will show up on everybody's schedule, or you can set it to just one person. If there are notes that you want to appear off to the right of the visit in that column, you can add your visit notes here. And we will save this. So now it's going to show me what I just did. And here are my visits. And in parentheses, we can see what day of the week these are scheduled for. So if I know that I don't want to have any visits, routine visits scheduled for the weekend, I could look at this one for January and say that's scheduled for Sunday. I'm going to change that to the Monday. And this one's on a Saturday. I'm going to change this to a Monday. And that's personal preference. It's perfectly fine for you to have a scheduled visit that is set for a Sunday. It just means that if you don't actually fulfill that visit on a Sunday, and then you look at your schedule on Monday, that visit will appear in red because you'll know it was actually scheduled for Sunday instead of for Monday. But if you like to have all of your visits occur as close to the date that you scheduled it for, or exactly on the date that you're scheduling it for, you can use this edit button to alter the day so that it is not occurring or scheduled for a weekend. And then if for some reason you need to cancel a visit, this little X over here allows you to cancel a visit. Now, you'll see down here at the bottom, there's this text that says enable patient scheduled visits review after encounter signature for, and then my name. So if you have this box checked, every time you sign an encounter for a patient, you're going to be prompted to review their scheduled visits. So if you really like to manage your time by having scheduled visits for patients, I encourage you to check this box and use this feature. It is a user by user feature. So if you want to have this feature on, but your colleague doesn't within the same organization, that's fine. It's not a group setting. It's an individual user setting. So you can control this and you can turn this off and on. Okay, includes managing scheduled visits and really the overview of the patient census. So I think next we should look at how to create and work through an encounter. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you from here how to create a new encounter and then also how to do that right from your facility census. So if I want to create a new encounter and I'm on this page, but I know the patient's name, I can just click new encounter, search for my patient. Here's the Melanie Moore patient we were just looking at. Some of this will auto-populate for you. It will ask you to select your billing provider, which in this case is me. It will ask you to select a scheduled visit. So this is how you associate those visits that you created with an encounter so that they get marked as completed in GEHRIMED when you sign the encounter. When you have this drop down, you want to pick the encounter or pick the visit that corresponds to the visit that's occurring. So if I have this visit scheduled for today, I'm going to pick it. It's by default picking the type that I selected previously when I created the visit. If I need to change this, I can. Date of service is going to default to today. Facility defaults to the building that GEHRIMED knows the patient is in. The encounter template your organization has a default encounter template, but you can change it if you need to. This list of encounter templates that we have in this demo environment is probably much larger than the list that you have available to your team. So you'll pick the encounter that you want to template that you want to use. if a transition occurs, like if you're reconciling meds, and there's electronic summary of care that you want to associate, you just pick one of these. This is a holdback to the old Medicaid meaningful use. Well, it's currently Medicaid meaningful use, but it used to be it was the old Medicaid meaningful use. Now it's called Medicaid promoting interoperability. If that's something that you are still participating in, these are important. If you're not, then it really doesn't matter if you select those or not. This is basically just ensuring that if you do participate in that program, you're getting the appropriate credit for doing these reconciliations. So when I click Create Encounter, what I see when I create an encounter depends upon the template that I picked. And I like to describe the template as it very much replicates pages in a paper note. If you were to do this on paper, you could think of each one of these sections or tabs from left to right as a different sheet of paper. So as you highlight these, the one that appears in dark blue is the one that all of this text corresponds to. And you've got all of these places to make documentation about this visit. And an encounter for a patient that you're seeing for a subsequent visit starts out with a lot more text to help you. So it gives you the ability to pull your previous text from previous encounters into this one. So we help you utilize this concept of charting by exception, because we know that patients that are in long-term post-acute care don't change often from visit to visit. Their conditions are chronic for the most part, and if they had diabetes last month, they still have diabetes this month. So we want to help you navigate through this encounter as seamlessly as possible by giving you some tools to help you populate some text that you have created before when you've seen the patient previously and put it into this note. So you'll see on some of these tabs this concept of normal text and previous text. Normal text is text that you can create or that we have created for you that is used commonly to describe certain things related to patient care. So we have given you system normals.
Hey, Katie.
You'll see over here. Yes, Matthew.
I had a question come in. So with MEBS, I believe this is in reference to something you were talking about just a moment ago. We do not have to choose that we reconciled meds.
That is, if you're doing MIPS promoting interoperability, then yes, that is also important. Good question. It's one of the places where the Medicaid PI and the MIPS PI overlap. They don't overlap completely. There are a couple of places where they overlap, and reconciling meds is one of them. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thank you. And that's generally done when you're creating a new patient. So when I create a new patient, I'll show you that. We'll get to that. Okay, so normal text. We've given you system normals. Every GEHRIMED environment comes loaded with system normals that we create for you based on our knowledge of the type of care that you provide to your patients. But you can also create company and group normals that are used within all users of your organization. And then you as a user can create your own user normals. So you'll see there is this hierarchy on the right here where we're looking at normals. The system normals are always at the bottom. If you have group or company normals, those go above, and then your own user normals are always at the top. So we assume that if you're creating a user normal, it's something that you intend to use on a regular basis. So you can create them, you can change the ordering of them. If you say, you know what, I think I'm going to use this one, use this one more than I use the other one, you can slide that one to the top just to make it easy to quickly grab it. So if you want to add text, normal text in here, so everything that appears in this center text field is going to populate on your signed encounter. So if I want to use the normals to put text into this section, I can clear out what's already here. And I could say, I want to use this piece of text and I want to use this piece of text, and I can add multiple normals and build out exactly what I want this to say. I can create new user normals very easily. So if I say, you know what, I use these three things an awful lot, I would like for all three of these pieces of text to be one normal. So I don't have to click three different normals to get this text in. I want to do that in one click. I can click this box that says set text as user normal. And then it appears over here in my user normals. And if I want this one to be my first one in my ordering, I just grab that number and drag it. So you can always click clear to clear this out, click on the normal to populate it in. If you are a Dragon user, anywhere that you see this little gray flame, you can use Dragon speech to text to dictate your text into this section. So when we look here, we've got this button that says normal and this button that says previous. So if I want to bring over all of my previous text from my last visit, I would just click on this, and you'll see now all these green check marks mean that there is text for each of these items. And if I click through them, it shows me what my text is. And I can bring over all of my previous text. And then if there's something I don't want to appear, like if I say, you know what, my chief complaint's different this time, I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to say, and then the HPI.
Hey, Katie.
Yes.
We received another question. An individual doesn't understand what things like my new normal text actually is.
Yeah, good question. That's an example of me adding normal text. I'm not clinical, so I didn't add clinical verbiage as my text. It was what you're seeing there is me, just my normal text is like whatever I want to type. So if I want a normal that, let me go back to where I just was, code status. If I want a normal that says something very similar to one of these, but I want it to be different, I can type anything I want here. So what you're seeing here where it says new normal text, my new normal text, that's just me giving an example of like, okay, this is my normal text. And then I set that as a user normal. So it's just me showing that you can type anything you want in here and it comes over as a normal. You can also delete them if you don't need it. So obviously, if you are creating normals, you're not going to create a normal that says something like my new normal text. You're going to create something that is clinical. You'll create something that says something more like code status normal or do not hospitalize unless told to. So whatever sort of clinical verbiage you generally use as you're documenting patient visits, you can put any of that text into a user normal. Does that make sense?
I'll let you know if we get anything additional coming through.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you, they said.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Natalie. Sorry if that was confusing. All right, so this concept of normal and previous applies to many of these sections in the template. So I can bring over previous. I can also bring over normals by clicking this button. It's going to bring over every single normal that's in the number one spot. So whatever my number one spot is, that's what appears here. And you can see here, here's my number one normal, here it is. So if you like to use whatever normal you have in the number one spot on many of your encounters, just click this button that says normal and it will bring them all over. If you prefer to use your previous text, you can click here. You don't have to use one of those or the other. They're just shortcuts for you. The most templates have a review of systems tab, and if your template has this tab, it behaves very much the same way as the history tab with respect to normals and previous. And over here, you'll see when this button is clicked, I'm viewing my normal text, but if I click this button, I'm viewing my previous text. So here's text that was previously added to encounters along with the date of the encounter. So again, I can populate anything I need to over here by clicking on these normals. And I can go right down the list and use normals or previous text to populate this, or I can use Dragon, or I can just free type whatever I need it to say. If you click this button, it's going to bring over your previous text. So here it's bringing over my most recent previous text from this most recent encounter. And you don't have to populate every single one of these sections. So if you leave it completely blank, there will be nothing that corresponds to eyes, for example, on my signed encounter because I didn't add any text for eyes. So it's only going to include text that I'm adding to my note. It's not going to add any gaps or blank spaces. You won't see this complete list on the signed encounter unless you have some text added for every single one of these items. Vital signs, we're going to add vitals either by just clicking this button. So if her weight is the same right now as it was last time, I can click here and it will populate that in. If her height's the same, pulse is the same, if the blood pressure has changed, I can type in what the different blood pressure is. And if you have Dragon, you can Dragon speak these as well. You also have a field over here where you can free text or use Dragon to add notes about the certain vitals. So if you're keeping an eye on somebody's weight or somebody's blood pressure or somebody's pain level, you can add notes about those vitals off to the right here. The physical exam tab works very similarly to review of systems. We realize that they are used in different ways, but functionally, they are basically the same. Again, you've got this long list of systems that you could review in a physical exam, and only the ones that contain text added by you will populate on the signed encounter. You can use your normals, or you can use previous, you can type it in, or you can use Dragon. I'm just going to put a little bit here so that you can see this on. This way, when we look at the encounter, we have some text on it so you can see what we've done. If you're manually adding information about labs, radiology, or tests, this is where you would do that. We don't currently have integrations to any laboratories. So if you are uploading any sort of imaging results or adding details about imaging results or a specific test, that would all be entered manually right here, either by typing or by Dragon. Summary of plans is not on every template. If you have it, it behaves like those other sections that we looked at. It behaves the same way that review of systems or physical exam does. You can create your own normals here. We don't give you system normals for this, but you can create your own. I'm going to skip this for now. Plan is a way for you to write a comprehensive plan about your patient. So if you like to do a comprehensive plan with lots of information, you can do so here and then carry it from a previous visit into this visit. So you can see previously, here was a plan. It's obviously a very short plan, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So if I click this, it brings it over, and then I can make whatever modifications to it that I need to. This way, you aren't recreating that detailed plan every single time. Most tabs, most templates don't have an other tab, but if you have one, you can use it or not. And then finally, this diagnosis and assessment tab. So here's where we're going to enter CPT codes, if there are any procedure codes, if there are any modifiers that go with the CPT codes, we add those here, as well as any diagnosis codes that are relevant for this visit. So GEHRIMED is place of service aware. So it knows where your patient is. It knows if this is a nursing facility or a skilled facility or an assisted living facility, and it knows which CPT codes may be used in those environments. This dropdown shows you the 10 most commonly used codes in this place of service. So I could just pick my code, but it's also a type ahead. So if there was a procedure that I completed and I need to add a second procedure code to this, I could just begin to type ahead. And just like with the diagnosis, I don't have to know what the actual code is. I could just start typing. And it's going to bring up lots of choices for me. So if I pick a code, now I've got a secondary code on here. Here is something new that we've added this year based on the guidance from CMS about how to handle telehealth visits due to COVID and how prevalent that became so quickly for so many people. We made the 95 modifier available in everybody's environment automatically. You didn't have to ask us for that. We just populated that into your environments because CMS's guidance said that for a telehealth visit during COVID, you should add the 95 modifier to whatever CPT code you normally would have billed. So we decided to give you a really quick and easy way to add that 95 modifier to your encounter. And obviously you should check with your billing people before utilizing this. But if they want you to utilize it, if you want to identify a visit as a telehealth visit using the 95 modifier, you just click this button that looks like a video camera. And when it turns green and there's a 95 modifier here, then you have identified it and added that modifier to the CPT code. So that will populate into your billing report so that whomever's handling your billing will know that this modifier has been added in order to account for the telehealth visit. So you have to have at least one CPT code and at least one ICD-10 code in order to sign an encounter. You've got your running problem list over here. And to add those codes to this encounter, you are simply going to click the plus sign and it brings it right over. Oh, see, that's an old one. So if you've had this patient in your care for a very long time and you see this pop up when you bring a diagnosis over, it's because there has been a change to the ICD-10 code and GEHRIMED knows that and it doesn't want you to use the old code anymore. So it's giving me a suggestion to use this code instead.
Hey, Katie.
Yes.
Had a question come through. Does the 95 modifier go on all of your codes, buddy codes?
That's a question for your biller. Because it will depend upon who the payer is, I think, and if it's a private insurance or if it's Medicare. So that's, we're giving you the tool to add the 95 modifier, but as far as when you should use the 95 modifier, that really is guidance that should come from your billing team.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so if I've added some codes over here, you'll notice that there are, there's a little check mark here identifying this as my primary ICD-10 code, but I can move the order of my codes around. So I can pull whatever diagnosis code represents the primary diagnosis to the top of this list. I can also add notes about it. Here I can add whatever text I need, either by typing or by using Dragon. And if I wanted to, I'm just going to get rid of these for a second. Bring at least one over before I see that. Okay, so what you see here, add all codes plus assessment from previous encounter. So if I want to bring over every diagnosis that was on the previous encounter, I just click here and they all come over. If I had added any text in these boxes, that text would also have come over. You have options to add only the codes but not the text, or to add all the codes from the problem list. So you've got some options here to shortcut some of this for you.
Okay.
And then once you, yes.
Had a question. I think you could answer it right after finishing up
Mm-hmm.
this. But how do you do a no bill visit? If you're just documenting only and not billing, is there a no bill? Is there a no charge code that you use, or how do you accomplish that?
Yes, good question. Most of our groups will use a 99999 no bill CPT code for that, and you have the ability to customize CPT codes in your options menu, and I'll show you that in a minute. So you can add options, custom CPT codes, and then you can add a 99999, and then GEHRIMED will recognize it as a code that you can use, but it is not a billable code. So that's generally how people will document maybe a phone call or something that you want to have an encounter for that's documented in the record, but isn't actually going out to bill anywhere. Okay, a little bit of help that we give you related to CPT codes is over here, top right corner. So if I click on this information, it's going to help me understand in this place of service which codes are available to me and how I should code based on the amount of time that I spent and how complex the patient is. So this is available to every GEHRIMED user in an encounter template right up here. So next, if I want to preview and sign this encounter, if I feel like it's done and it's ready and I click preview and sign, first thing that happens is I will get prompted for quality measures if I am a MIPS participant. So if I'm reporting MIPS and I have quality measures turned on in GEHRIMED, at this point, I get prompted to answer quality measure questions for any measures that this patient meets eligibility for based on demographics, place of service, and sometimes diagnosis. So to fulfill MIPS and just record these answers, I simply click the response that's appropriate. If it says eligible, it's looking for an answer. If it says completed, I know I've answered this one before. So some of the measures, like this one, number 130, is going to look for an answer on every encounter. Other measures, like 134, only needs one answer each year. So this is remembering that I've answered before. It's giving me an opportunity to change the answer if the situation has changed. But if nothing has changed and this is still the appropriate answer, I can just move on. So I click save and continue. This is just because I have multiple logins. You generally won't see that. And here's what my encounter will look like. And you'll see it's a live document. So what I mean by that is as I move my cursor around, it highlights in blue because if I need to change something, I just click where it's highlighted and it bounces me right back to that exact place in my template. And if I say, you know what, this is not what I meant to say, this is what I meant to say, and I can change my text. And I can do that multiple times over and over again. So if I'm satisfied with how this looks, you can also change the style. So my default style is this split style where I've got some text on the left and some text on the right, but some people like this kind of style where it's everything vertically instead of side by side. That is completely personal preference. I can sign and close or I can sign and view. If I sign and view, there's my reminder about scheduled visits because I have this turned on. So if you try this and you find that it's not helpful to you, you can always click this little button and turn it off. But as long as this box is checked, this will pop up every time you're signing an encounter for a patient. It can be a good reminder if you don't have recurring visits scheduled, or even if I do, but I say, well, I'm not supposed to see her for 1 month, but I actually want to follow up on something with her in 2 weeks. Right here, I can say, I'm going to schedule an acute visit or follow up with her 2 weeks from today with me. And that goes into her list of scheduled visits. So now we can see it's signed. Here's my electronic signature down here at the bottom. And once it's signed, I cannot make any changes to any of this text. It's a signed legal document. It is finalized, and I can't alter this. I could add to it, but I can't alter it. 2 things happened when I signed that. Well, 3 things happened. One was that my quality responses got recorded in the background and updated my MIPS dashboard with my most recent denominators and all of those pieces of data that push into my GEHRIMED MIPS totals. Secondly, a copy of this encounter became available to the facility. If you have email or fax delivery set up, it went to the facility by email or by fax. If you are a GEHRIMED care or a care team user, it is now available in Care Team for your facility staff to view. And then thirdly, this information is now populating into a billing report that will be run very early tomorrow morning that contains all of your billing from today, so that whomever does your billing has the information for signed encounters that's required. So if you get to this point and you realize that you need to add, you forgot something, you need to add an addendum. Under the options menu, you can add an addendum. You have to enter your password just so that GEHRIMED is sure that you are the person who created the encounter. So you are the person who is approved. If I could type my password right, that would help. Okay, so my addendum text is, I'm just going to add whatever your addendum text is. In the real world, is going to be something clinical here. It's not going to say add my addendum text here, but you'll add your addendum text here and then click add addendum. And now you'll see down here that whatever text you added will appear right here along with a second timestamp. So the addendum always gets a timestamp. Now, if there was something related to this encounter that you need to change, not the text of it, but maybe this visit actually occurred yesterday and not today. There are some things that I can change even after signature. So if I go to options, change criteria, I could change the billing provider. So if this patient was actually seen by somebody else, I could change that. If my scheduled visit, if I forgot to associate it to a scheduled visit, I can do that here. If I entered the wrong visit type, I can change that. I can change my date of service. If I click on it, I would type it, but if I click the drop-down arrow, my calendar opens. I could say this happened yesterday. Or if the patient's actually not in this facility, and we see this a lot with groups that have GEHRIMED facilities broken out by place of service. So if you have a separate facility, like if you've got Sunrise Nursing Center, Sunrise Skilled, and Sunrise Assisted Living, all as separate facilities in GEHRIMED, and you finish with this patient, but you realize that this patient is not actually in a nursing bed, this patient is in a skilled bed, you can change that by clicking this drop-down arrow and picking the correct facility from this. You cannot change the patient name, and you cannot change the encounter template. But these other items you can change. If you want to change the title of it, you can. And then click update, and it makes the changes for you. Okay, so there's encounter workflow. Let's say I have walked into a building, I don't have a point-click care integration, I'm seeing a brand new patient that I've never seen before, or at least I don't think this patient is in GEHRIMED. So if I want to search for a patient, I click the search button. And then I'm going to type the patient's name. It didn't find an Amy test. So if it's not finding an Amy test, I can click this new patient button down here in the bottom left. And I only need these 5 pieces of information to create a new patient in GEHRIMED. It knows the zip code because it's a facility that is in your system. Social security number is optional. You don't have to add that. So I'm going to click next. And now, even though I searched for Amy before, it's still going to do an attempt at matching for me. It's going to look and see if I'm creating a duplicate patient. If this was a duplicate patient, all the things that match are in green. So this would basically, every field here would be green and I would know it was a perfect match. This is not a perfect match to anything. So if I want to create this new patient with what I've entered right here, make sure this little button is on, and I say create new patient with selected, and now it's creating the patient. And here's where all of the very detailed patient demographics can get added, where we are updating her contact information, her emergency contact information, her insurance information. That can all get added on these screens, but you don't have to add that information in order to do an encounter for the patient. You can enter that information later. So if I need to hurry up and see this patient, I would just click create patient and create new encounter, and it would take me through those steps of creating a new encounter where I pick my template, I pick myself as the billing provider, pick my date of service, and then it's exactly like the steps that we just went through. If I want to just create the patient and not an encounter, I can do that right here. I'm actually not going to create her because I have so many test patients. So searching for and creating patients is very quick and easy. You can also create a new patient while creating a new encounter. So if I say new encounter, but I know this is a brand new patient, there is this create new patient button right here. So I can search for the patient by name, or if I click this create new patient, I see that exact same box that I saw a moment ago when we created that patient. Okay, we've got about 25 minutes left and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I would like to just quickly show you a couple things about triage, a couple things about your MIPS dashboard, and then advanced search. So I'll make sure to stop by 3:45 so that we've got time for questions if we need to address them. And let me just remember. Tammy, you were asking about copying and pasting. So that depends upon the device that you're on, really. So Control C and Control V, if you're using a Windows-based laptop, is how you would copy and paste. You would use your mouse to highlight the text that you want, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. If you're on an iPad, I believe that you have to press the text that you want and hold it until that little copy option comes up, and then click the copy, and it will capture that text. And then when you go to the place where you want to paste it, you press your finger, wait for that little paste button to come up. Okay, so triage is a tool that is often used for patients that are seen for a non-billable service that you don't want to have documented in an encounter. So this is commonly used by our customers that are managing their own evening and weekend call. If calls come in about a patient fell, it's a fall, no injury, it needs to be documented. You want it attached to the patient record, but you don't need an encounter for it. Someone needs to follow up on it. That's what you can use triage for. So you'll see that when you go into triage, you have your list of providers and your list of facilities. and then a date range. So I could say, I want to look at, right now it's all providers. If I started to pick, it's going to narrow. But if I clear it, it's just going to show me everyone. Same is true. It's showing me all facilities unless I want to look at specific facilities. And if I want to go back to the big view and look at all of them, I click clear, and that brings me, like it zooms out to the big picture. The date range, unfortunately, you can't customize this and look at like 3 days or 10 days. You can only look at the frequencies that are available right here. But if we want to expand this out, look at the past 6 months, here are all of the triage notes that were created during the past 6 months. The resolved triage notes are hidden. That's what this checkbox means. So if I uncheck that, now I will see also the ones that were resolved. I'm going to hide the resolved ones again. So a triage note is going to tell you the facility that the patient's in, whatever the issue is, a provider who's assigned to it, and when it's been updated or resolved. You can add a disposition once the issue's been addressed. So if we want to add a new one, click Add Triage, search for a patient. Populates the building for you.
Hey, Katie.
Hey.
Had a question come through, and I think we might be able to answer it right here. With
Okay.
triage, are you able to assign multiple providers, or can you only assign one provider?
Great question. You can, you have to assign it to a specific provider. You have to pick one from the list, and only one.
Okay, thanks.
So if I'm creating this, I add my text. If I need to create a triage for a brand new patient, I've got the same option to add a new patient that we saw before. I click Save. Now you can see it's come into the top because the most recent one is the one that appears first on the list. If I want to resolve any of these, I just click this. This is like a shortcut to resolve it. So I can say, you know what? This was an old one for her. I'm going to resolve this. Yes. And now that one's resolved. It's not gone forever. It's just not going to appear on this list right now anymore. But if I want to edit, I would click the name. Oh, no, sorry, that goes to the patient details. Oh gosh, no. But if I want to edit, I click this. And this allows me to either edit this or I can add a disposition. And then I can resolve it from here. So if you want to resolve with a disposition, you open the edit box and do so. If you just want to resolve with no disposition, that's what that little arrow is for.
Hey, Katie.
Yes.
Natalie asked, where do these triage notes show up in the patient's record?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to let me go find Melanie Moore so you can see what we just did. So right here, if active triage is highlighted, we've got these that can highlight left to right. So if this is your highlighted button, active triage is going to show me any active triage notes that she has, but I can also look at resolve notes. So they are permanently attached to the patient medical record. If we were ever requested to provide the patient's medical record, to you on because you had an audit or some reason that you needed to have all the patient's medical records pulled out of GEHRIMED, triage notes would be included in what we're pulling. All right, moving along, let's take a quick look at advanced search because I see a lot of questions about how to use advanced search to find all of your patient visits, for example. Like if you're scheduling lots of visits and you want to know what is my schedule for next week, that is one of the primary ways that I see users using advanced search. So advanced search gives you the ability to search in different layers of logic. So you always have to pick whatever your first search is. So if I want to search on patient visits, I can. But for example, if you wanted to look at encounters and say, let me look at all of my encounters for last month or all of my encounters for last year, you would pick the first piece of logic here. You can even search on your problem list. So let's look at everybody who has a diabetes diagnosis, or let's look at everybody who has a certain kind of lab result. So if we just want to look for patient visits, it's remembering what I did last time. I can say patient visits with a visit date, and then I can change this to say on or after. So let's look at visit dates on or after tomorrow. So here's everything we have scheduled on or after tomorrow, but I don't necessarily want to know from tomorrow to infinity. Maybe I just want to know from tomorrow until the 30th of November. So this gives me the date range. And I've got 22 results. I can sort them by clicking on any of these column headers. So if I want to sort them by facility and know how many buildings do I have to go to between now and the end of the month and which patients are in them, I can expand this out so I don't have to click between pages. You can print this by clicking this print button down here in the bottom left, just to do a quick print, or you can export it as an Excel spreadsheet so that you can further manipulate it. So if you are exporting all of the visits for your entire team into one Excel spreadsheet, and then you want to sort it using the Excel functionality, you can. Otherwise, you could even narrow this and say, let's look for patient visits just for me. And there are my visits between now and the end of November. So advanced search gives you pretty powerful ability to look at the visits and a lot of the data that you've put into the patient details. And I encourage you to play around with advanced search and see what that very first search criteria lets you look at a deeper level. All right, and then just a quick look at the MIPS dashboard. If you are a MIPS provider and you need to know how you're doing in MIPS, you pick your name from the list and click calculate, and it's going to show you how you're doing in all of the categories. This quality category is probably the one you're going to keep the closest eye on throughout the year. So if I click into it, it shows me my details. So here are all the measures that I have active, what my eligible population looks like, the number of eligible patients for each measure. Reporting rate is how often I'm reporting on these measures, how often I record answers. And the performance rate is telling me how often the answer that I pick is an answer that meets performance the way that's defined by the measure. And all of those things push into a point value for the quality measure. So this GEHRIMED is forecasting for you how many points you'll get for each of the measures that you're answering based on how many times you answer and what kind of answers you're giving. So this is a real-time dashboard, and it's going to show you from day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour. You could look at this in the morning, and then if you go see a lot of patients and then you look at it later in the day, your numbers could be different because it is real-time updating with fresh data so that you have the best possible look at what your progress is. All right, so that is essentially what I plan to cover today. We've got some time for Q&A. If there are any other questions out there that you'd like to ask, just pop them into the chat box, please. Yes, pulling reports. Okay. So there are some standard reports, but if you're looking at, you want to be able to pull things based on CPT code, that's something that you can find in advanced search. So if I go to advanced search and I choose encounter as my primary search field, I can search encounter by CPT code. So if I want to know every time we've used the code 99308, I can add that. Obviously, there's going to be a lot here. And advanced search is going to limit your results to 500. If you have more than 500 results, they won't display here, but they will export. So if you truly want to look at a set of results that's greater than 500, as long as it's less than 10,000, go ahead and export it. And to export it, you have to encrypt it. So you give it a password. It does not have to be your GEHRIMED password. That way, if you're sharing the report with somebody else, you're not sharing your GEHRIMED password with that person. I like to use the exact same password for every report that I encrypt. That way, if I'm opening a report from yesterday or from 6 months ago, I know what my password, my report password is. So you create a password. You have to have 7-zip on your computer in order to encrypt and zip this. 7-zip is a free tool. If you don't have it, you can add it to your machine at no cost. So once you create a password and you click submit, it's going to ask you where on your computer you want to save it, just like it would if you were downloading anything else. And then when you go to open it, you have to use that same password that you used when you downloaded it. But you can continue to narrow this if you don't want to see everything that's ever been 99308, but maybe just all of my 99308s. Since January 1st. That was just, I didn't use on or after, I used the exact date of signature. Let me fix that. So you've got is, or you can do on or after. That's what I forgot to do. So here's everything that we've signed in the year 2020 to date with the 99308 CPT code. So you can pick any, you can use any code you need to, obviously, and then you can add signatures, or instead of signature, you could say, let's look at a specific provider, let's look at a specific facility. You can narrow this down in a number of ways. If we are talking about the standard reports that come with GEHRIMED, those are in this reports folder. If you don't have a reports folder, because sometimes if you've got ePrescribe, the ERX button is right here. You can also get to reports by going options, view reports. So this shows you the standard reports that every GEHRIMED customer gets from us on a set frequency. And the frequencies vary. Some of our reports are daily, some are weekly, some are monthly. So if we look at all the reports that came out today, there's a daily billing, a month-to-date billing. There is a days to sign encounters report. Today happens to be Wednesday, and Wednesday is when our weekly reports come out. So this is a weekly, encounters by service date's a weekly. All of these reports include, the title of the report's pretty descriptive of what's in it. And you have to download it, just like we did with the advanced search results. So you click download, give it a password, save it on your computer, and then you can open it. And it's an Excel file, so you can sort and manipulate it as you need to. There are a few summary reports that always come out on the first of a month. So you'll notice if you look at the first, there's a monthly billing and a monthly CPT summary. So if you're looking for CPT information, this CPT summary on a monthly basis could be really helpful because it gives you big picture information, but then also really detailed information. So it shows you at the group level what the CPT code usage has been, but then also drills down to the CPT code usage by provider. So it can help you identify if you've got providers who tend to over or under code. All right, I saw one here. Back to triage. How does provider 2 know he needs to see phone with provider 1 with the phone call? Yeah, great question. So triage is going to show you here a running count of all new triage notes. So if you as a practice are utilizing triage on a regular basis, you can communicate to your team to keep an eye on triage, and they'll know here. None of them are new right now, but if something had come in new that I hadn't seen yet, this indicator would be a 1, or if there were 2 of them, it would be a 2. So I would know that there were 2 new triage notes that I hadn't seen yet. So then I'm prompted to go ahead and open triage and review those notes. So even though you can't necessarily send a triage note to a provider, it does give everybody on the team the ability to see when new triage notes exist so that they know that they should go and take a look at that. Okay, we've got 6 minutes left.
It looks like there was an additional question that came in, Kitty. I'm not sure.
Oh, if I would change a CP code, right. No, unfortunately, if you change a CPT code in an addendum, it doesn't map back to the CPT report. It does map back to the billing report, and the billing report captures is a tab that captures changes that occur on addendums. So you would, on your addendums tab of the billing report, have that information, but it does not, because it's not going into GEHRIMED in a structured way, it's going in just as text in an encounter. So those changes that happen post-signature in an addendum related to CPT code do not map back to the CPT usage report.
Thanks. It looks like there is an additional question that got posted to the chat from Chris.
Okay.
Says, are clients sending CCDAs exclusively when sharing information with other healthcare providers? There has been some concern about potential formatting of information in the CCDA.
So a CCDA is it stands for clinical summary of care document, but CCDA is a structure of data. And one of the requirements of certification, and something that all certified EHRs have in common, is that the CCDAs can map to each other. So the structure of our CCDA is actually built in a way that it can map into other systems. It is that standard architecture. And because it's a standard architecture, it is mappable. So maybe what you're seeing, Chris, is that you have a little bit of flexibility as a GEHRIMED user to move things around in the CCDA, but everything that is here in the background, like when you actually send it electronically, can map into another system. If you just print this out and send it, then obviously it's not mapping electronically. But if you are electronically sending the CCDA and it's being ingested by another system, then it is structured in a way that that other system can ingest it, even if it looks different than other CCDAs on the surface. And then that reminds me that we didn't look at reconciling meds for a new patient for MIPS.
Katie, did we lose you? Well, everyone, it seems as if we may have lost Katie due to connectivity issues. I'm going to message her and see what the situation may have been, but it does look like we got to everyone's open questions. So thank you so much for attending today. I'm going to coordinate with Katie to ensure we get the recording available to you all very shortly. And if you have any additional questions, please, of course, reach out to Katie. I'm sure she wouldn't mind being emailed directly with your additional questions. Or if you have any last minute things that you'd like answered, just add them into the chat and they'll be archived for me to share with her after the webinar concludes here in a moment. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you at next month's new user training hours.